Well, hello everybody, and welcome to the first proper episode of Munchkin Musings, a brand new Wizard of Oz World podcast. My name is Sam. You may recognise me from other podcasts such as Hula La, a Doctor Who podcast, or the first episode in this series where I introduced myself and said why I want to do a Wizard of Oz podcast. Hello again. How are you all doing? I love making podcasts. I've actually recently put our other podcast that I co-host on a hiatus, and I was itching to get back into the world. I was very excited too. The timing worked out perfectly for this one. I'm excited to dive into the world of Oz. I want to be an inspirational Oz historian, camp crusader, because there's so much camp and silliness and joy in the Wizard of Oz world, and it's so far spread. I wanted to get into it, I want to dive in. But I didn't feel like, dear listener, I could dive in right away without going back where we all began, back to the very first piece of Oz media, the original book, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, of course written by Baum. Now, my memories of this are reading it as a child, having it read to me as a kid by my parents. It was something that I read as a kid but haven't gone back to read as an adult. I remember my brother, when I graduated uni, gave me a really gorgeous edition, like a hardback version of this book. He wrote a cute little message into it, and my partner's mum for Christmas a couple of years ago gave me the Minalima sort of pop-up illustrated version, and again I'd like flip through it and look at the illustrations but I hadn't properly read it, so I was like, okay, I'm gonna actually go back and properly listen. I did think for a second, because I actually started reading this on iBooks. I was on a plane on the way back from holiday and I thought, no, I'm gonna go back and read the first Oz book. And I started reading it on iBooks. I'm really, really glad that because they're royalty free, all of the Oz books are available to read, at least on the Apple Bookstore. And that is just amazing. It makes them so accessible, I think. The first one actually has an audiobook with Titus Burgess. I did debate, I listened to the first bit just to see how it sounded. And I did debate using this to read the book. And I think that's great. I think people who listen to audiobooks, it means you're consuming more media, and I love that. But for me, more so than anything, I wanted to challenge myself to actually read it. I know that sounds silly because it's a kid's book. I mean, yes, it's a kid's book from like the early 1900s, but a kid's book all the same. But I had confession time on the pod. I haven't read a book the whole way through in about 10 years. I know that's awful. I keep getting about 2/3 of way through books, and I just put them down unintentionally and I never pick them up. So I was like, no, like, silly as it sounds, I'm going to challenge myself to reread this book. And I did. I started it on the ebook, and then because I remembered I had these physical copies, I decided to read the Minalima version because the illustrations are so beautiful. It's so interactive. They have these pop-out glasses that you can put on when you're in Oz, and they've got like a map of the land of Oz and all these interactive elements and beautiful illustrations on pretty much every single page. They're the graphic designers. They're a couple who met when designing a very famous Wizarding World movie series, and I find it quite funny because obviously they're incredibly talented, amazing designers who are most known for that series. I used to work in Soho down the road from their store. They have a store there, and in July I noticed their whole window was full of Wizard of Oz stuff, and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing, like so much Oz stuff. And the illustrations they had done for this book, they'd then made like notebooks and pens and pencils and stuff. And I thought, oh, great, they're pushing their other diverse sort of portfolio, fantastic. And then as soon as July was done and Pride celebrations in London were over, they went right back to the other Wizarding World, which I was like, oh, that's funny. Yeah, it's a beautifully designed book, and it was really, really gorgeous. They have amazing collection of all of the Oz books on Apple Books, so I would definitely recommend it. But yeah, I wanted to start talking about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. It was released on the 17th of May, 1900, written by L. Frank Baum and illustrated by W. Denslow, who actually only illustrated this one Oz book. Like loads of the other ones, the majority of the other ones, certainly all the ones written by Baum, were illustrated by John R. Neal. But I didn't realise that Denslow only did the first one. I thought before I jump into the actual book itself, I wanted to do a little bit of research. So I don't think I really explained it in my first episode, my introduction, but I see this podcast as like a once a month thing. So I previously have done podcasts that were every week. I've done podcasts that were bi-weekly or fortnightly. And for this, I kind of want to do proper research and actually give you my in-depth thoughts on the thing I'm looking into, some camp twists I've found, some funny notions. It's not going to be anything serious. Come on, it's me. It's never going to be serious. Like I said, I'm looking to become somewhat of an Oz historian in this. So I want to do my research. I want to have everything well thought out. I'm sure there'll be plenty of bonus episodes to fill out the months otherwise. But at least once a month, you'll be getting a properly thought out episodic episode of Munchkin Musings, the musings from this Munchkin, the wannabe fourth member of the Lullaby League. So I did a little bit of research into L. Frank Baum, born on the 15th of May, 1856 in Chattanooga, New York. Died on May 6th, 1919 in Los Angeles, California. He was 62 years old. He had 14 Oz books that he'd written and 41 other books, as well as lots of other unpublished works. I know he also wrote several short stories for Oz. I'm not sure how many of them were released posthumously, but he wrote a lot about Oz. And what I found quite funny I've actually now read the first, the second, and I've started the third. Looking forward into other books as well. He writes a foreword at the beginning of each of the books, and he's like, this might be my last one. It's just like, I never thought I'd write another. I never thought I'd come back to Oz, but you children, you keep writing to me, and I don't know why I've made him like a posh Edwardian man, but you keep writing to me, and I'll keep writing these damn books. And it just sounds like he doesn't want to come back, but he kept coming back. In the latter part of his life, he also went on to make a lot of independent films based on the Oz books, but as far as I could tell, not many of them were particularly successful. He did successfully produce an Oz musical for Broadway in 1902, and I kind of want to do my own episode on that because that's been really interesting. I've done a little bit of digging into that, and there's a lot to unearth and a lot that I don't know, and a lot of interesting stuff, so let me know if you'd be interested in an episode about that. But it sounds like his most successful sort of lineage were, of course, the Oz books. His son, Harry Neal, had said that he would often tell them of whimsical stories before they became materials for his books, which I thought was nice. Now, as I mentioned, this first Oz book was illustrated by W.W. Denslow, and the designs at the time were really sort of illustrious and lavish. They had illustrations on many pages, they had different colours, several colour plate selections and illustrations, and that was quite rare for the period, I think, if people just wanted to kind of get the books out, but there was a lot of craft and care taken into certainly the first edition of this. And I feel like this is something that by not reading these like original publications or their reruns, is something that I am missing out on in the books. I was lucky enough to buy not quite a first edition, but I think the Chicago first edition run of The Road to Oz. I've not read it yet properly because I want to, read it in lineage with the other books that I'm reading, but I've had a look through and the illustrations are just gorgeous. They're amazing. I think my version was published in 1917, so it's well over 100 years old now. And I saw for the 100th anniversary, they did a reprint of all of the books in both paperback and hardback with the original covers and the original illustrations, and that series I really want to buy. I think it's like £12 per book. You buy them online, and so it'd only be like, not only, the reason I'm not buying it is because it'd be about £160 I think for all of them, but that is something I definitely want because I agree that I think, W.W. Denslow and then John R. Neal's illustrations later becomes so important to the storytelling as much as the writing, and that's something that I really want to delve into while I'm reading. What's interesting about W.W. Denslow's illustrations is how closely he worked with Baum to create the world, but how much he independently put stuff in that has now become so synonymous with Oz. So, for example, the Tin Man's funnel hat, like that was never physically described in the books, but that's something that was in the illustration. I think pretty much every adaptation of the Tin Man since then has had the funnel hat. One thing I enjoyed looking into while researching around the book, before I dive into my own thoughts, was where Baum sort of drew inspiration from. The Scarecrow, he basically had a lot of nightmares about this Scarecrow sort of chasing him across a field, and right before the Scarecrow sort of, quote, his raggedy hay fingers nearly gripped his neck, he'd like wake up and be like, huh, huh, and suddenly wake up. And I think that that's just interesting that, this kind, hapless, brainless Scarecrow that we know from the books drove from a pretty scary nightmare from Baum. So again, before I dive into my thoughts, I was also interested in the public reaction at the time. So on May 17th, 1990, the first copy came out to the press, and apparently Baum actually assembled it by hand himself and gave it to his sister, Mary Louise Brewster. But the public first saw the book at the Palmer House in Chicago, July 5th. And by October 1900, the first edition had already sold out, and the second edition of 15,000 copies had nearly entirely gone. So it was selling like hotcakes. Do they have hotcakes in 1900? Do they have hotcakes now? I don't even know if I've ever had a hotcake. I have no idea. Now, in my previous podcast, when I go through Doctor Who episodes, I would do a little episode recap of the story before diving in. And to be honest, I really debated whether or not to do it on this. I'm like, it's the Wizard of Oz. Everyone knows the Wizard of Oz. But then I realised I think most people know the movie, and there is actually so much more in the book that it doesn't happen in the movie, or it's in other adaptations that people might not know. So I did do a little recap of the story for you before I dive into my own Munchkin musings about the book. So The Wizard of Oz is the first book in L. Frank Baum's series, and it started it all for this universe. We follow Dorothy, a farm girl from Kansas, and her dog Toto as they're whisked away from her Uncle Henry and Aunt Em to the magical land of Oz. There, she meets the Munchkins and the Good Witch of the North, who give her a pair of silver slippers and send her on her way to the Emerald City to ask the wonderful Wizard of Oz to help her get home. On the way, she meets the brainless Scarecrow, heartless Tin Woodman, and Cowardly Lion, who join her on her travels. On the way, they meet Calidars and cross wide rivers, brave potent poppies, and meet royal mice until they arrive at the gate of the City of Emeralds. With their green glasses on, they each get a chance to meet the wizard, though he appears in different forms to each of them. A giant head, a beautiful woman, a fierce animal, and a ball of fire, and each of them are told that they must bring back the broomstick of the Wicked Witch of the West in order to have their wishes met. On their way to the west, the Wicked Witch sends wolves, crows, and bees to try to stop them, but to no avail. Eventually, she sends the winged monkeys, who she has control over with a magic cap, to capture Dorothy and the Lion and destroy the Scarecrow and Tin Woodman. They become slaves to the witch until Dorothy melts her with a bucket of water, and the formerly enslaved Winkies help save her friends. They return to the wizard and learn that he's a humbug with no real powers at all. He gives her friends his version of brains, heart, and courage, and tries to take Dorothy back to Kansas by balloon, though he's eventually whisked away without her. Advised to speak to Glinda, they travel south to ask her for help in sending Dorothy home. That journey is no safer than before. They come across fighting trees, a town made entirely of breakable china, a great beastly spider, and heavy-headed quadlings. But with the help of the monkeys, they make it to Glinda. There, she tells Dorothy that her silver slippers had the power to take her home all along. The monkeys will take her friends where they need to go, and Dorothy clicks her heels 3 times and soon finds herself back home in Kansas again. I love rereading that book. I honestly hadn't read it since I was a kid, and there was so much in there that I forgot about, and so much that I forgot that I loved. I love The Country Made Entirely of China. I think that's such an amazing concept. I'd love to properly see it in an Oz film. The closest we ever really got to my memory is Oz the Great and Powerful, in live action anyway. And then there's also, I think, Legends of Oz, Dorothy's Return, the Leah Michele animated movie, where Megan Hilty, who I found out recently, actually voices the China Princess. But I would love to see like a proper sort of Wicked style, I guess, adaptation that includes that. I think we are getting an Oz remake and reimagining soon. So who knows, maybe they'll be in there. But let's dive into my thoughts on the material. Now, the way that I did this is, as I was reading the book, I basically just made live notes as I was going, similar to how I would if I was reviewing an episode of TV. And I think that's the way to go because it keeps me fresh in my mind when I'm thinking something in a moment, like, oh, let me write this down. There's a bit, oh my God, in the third book, which I'll get to in another episode, where Dorothy's transvestigating the chicken. She's just talking to Bellina, and Bellina's like, I'm called Bill, and Dorothy's like, that's a man's name, but we'll get to, all good things in good time. We'll get there. The first thing that I actually notice in this book is how fast it moves. It moves at such a breakneck speed. It's mad. I was on page 4, and bear in mind I was at first reading this on iBook, so a page is a lot smaller in text than an actual book would be. But by page 4, I was already in the cyclone. I remember I was on a plane, and I tapped to my friends who was on the plane with, and I told them I was going to read this, and I was like, she's already in the tornado. Like in the movie, by this point, we get introduced to all the friends on the farm, and there's the tornado, and then over the rain. But it's just, there's so much that's there that they added. And it was just mad to see how quickly it moved on. But despite how quickly it moves, Baum's writing is so vivid and descriptive and clear. It is so easy to visualize. And I think it's great writing for children because you can really picture it, like how he describes Kansas and the grey prairies and how the weather and time and everything has aged everyone. And Uncle Henry and Aunt Em are just like grey and withered by all this weather. There's an artist, I need to see if I can find their tag on Instagram, who's been reimagining all of the characters in Oz and doing illustrations based on the descriptions of the book and different outfits they might be in based on what they say, and how they described visually Uncle Henry and Aunt Em and translate that into their drawing was just amazing. I'll try and find out who that was and note it next episode, but it's so good. Honestly, no wonder children love these stories. They're so visually descriptive. It's difficult not to keep referencing the movie because I think that is my closest and best point of reference. It's certainly the material I know the best. But what always surprised me is how different this book is to the movie. So, for example, The Witch of the North and the Munchkins are really, really different. Like in the movie, they just kind of meld The Witch of the North and Glinda into one character. But in this, The Witch of the North is like a little old lady that lives in Munchkinland. She has a cottage. She lives upon the Munchkins, and blue is the colour of the Munchkins. I love as well. I'll go into it more later, but I love how each quarter of Oz, and then you've got the centre, is described by a different colour. Oz has different colours in different areas. I think it's purple, red, yellow, blue, and green. Obviously green for the centre where the Emerald City is. And I just thought that was, again, so visual and so easy to visualise and really, really, really great. Just as captivating now as it was when it would have been written. I feel like in this book, there's a lot less use of what I'd say is random magic. So, for example, the Witch of the East crumbles in the heat because she's so old. When she dies in the heat, she crumbles, and the Witch of the North has to dust off of the shoes before giving them to Dorothy, and she, picks up the shoes and gives them to Dorothy. Whereas in the film, she kind of like the shoes disappear. And the Wicked Witch's dead feet kind of curl under the house, and suddenly they appear on Dorothy's feet all shiny and new. And I just thought it was interesting that everything happens in this. Like, there's a process for everything happening. I also completely forgot about the floating blackboard, which I love. There's a really great anime, I think, from '84 of The Wizard of Oz, and it's a musical, and they did an English language version, which I had a video of as a kid. I need to watch that and do that on this at some point. That was amazing. And the magical floating blackboard is a really big thing in that, and I remember I had all the amazing sound effects that were like, whoop, when it would come up. So I really, really liked that. I also just found it funny that the only reason why Dorothy ends up with the silver slippers is because her old ones are worn out, and like she's going on a long walk, and she was like, "Oh, these will do." So like she got given these magical silver slippers that she obviously doesn't know are magical, and she was just like, "Oh, they're wearing well. They'll do for the walk." And I just thought that was such a silly reason, as opposed to like, "Take the ruby slippers. Their magic must be very powerful." It's just, nah, these will do for the walk. I thought it was fun seeing Bock's name in there. I mean, clearly, like, it originates from this, and that they took that for Wicked. But he's the richest Munchkin. I wasn't expecting to hear of him in this book. I was like, me and Bock, both in the middle of the Wizard of Oz. There you go. Again, going back to how descriptive the book is, it has such a great use of adjectives, and I love when we first meet the Scarecrow. There's the chapter about how he remembers being made and like speaking to the crows, and how he couldn't see, but then they painted his eyes on and suddenly he could see. And I just felt like that was so visual and kind of carries through as you meet all of the friends. It's so descriptive. And there's a bit when they meet the lion where he's talking about being a coward, and the Tin Man just goes like, "Maybe you have heart disease." I just thought that was so funny. Just, well, maybe you have heart disease, and everything just comes back to the heart. It's funny looking at this through a 2025 lens. It's almost a double-edged sword. I love how descriptive the book is, but at times through this 2025 lens, I'm like, oh, this feels a little bit ChatGPT, where he's like, the place is like this, and it looked like this, and the water was like that, and the cliffs were like this. And there's like odd little bits in there that I kept forgetting about, which almost felt a bit like, not padding, but like, do you remember the bit in Little Britain where there was the character who would... I can't remember her name. She'd be writing or dictating a story and talk like this. And they'd say, "How many pages is that?" And they go, 37. She's like, "Okay. Have you read the Bible?" So the character then picks up the Bible and says, "I'm going to read this. Chapter 1 Corinthians," and starts reading the Bible. Like, there's the bit where they're trying to cross the river and someone has a boat. They're like, "Oh, please, can we use your boat to get us across the river?" And he goes, "No." "Oh, no, it's even better that." He says, "Do you have any money? Are you going to pay me?" And they're like, "No, we don't have any money." And he's like, "Oh, then I'm not going to take you across my boat." So like, well, I have to find another way. And I think the lion like jumps them across or something. And I'm like, that just is such a funny bit to add in there. Why did you even need that? It's so funny. Because of bits like that, I feel like there are certain scenes that move too quick in this pace. Like the Calida scene, in my opinion, is way too quick. I actually thinking about like, if I was adapting this, I think that you could make an amazing sort of quote faithful adaptation of this. And it's got the bare bones to like pad out an even better stories. I think this would be a great series, like breaking down one Baum book into one series and having each episode feel almost like a different chapter. Not like a chapter is in like a full chapter from the book, because you'd have to really pad the episodes out, but you could make like a 5-part mini-series about each book and then give each of the sections the time they deserve. I also just have this like itch in my head. I think this would look so good in stop motion, like the way that it's described and the way that you could adapt all of the illustration. I just think it would look so good in stop mo. If you weren't doing a mini-series, I actually think specifically this book would work so well as an open-world video game. I think there are so many odd little side quests that they do in, they're going to the Emerald City. That's their quest at the moment, Dorothy and her 4 friends. But then, we've got to meet the Calida, we've got to get across the river, we've got to get through the poppies, we've got to speak to the field mice. Like, there's so many little side quests. I just think like as an open world game as well, just in the world of Oz with all the colours and everything, I just think that'd be stunning. I think it would be so good. Now, talking about the pace again, like I think this is a funny element from it. Like when they meet the wizard, it only lasts one chapter, like they all meet the wizard, but they set them all on different days. In other adaptations, they've changed this. Obviously in the movie, they all see him and it's just one big head. In the 80s anime, they do all go see him, but they kind of just wait outside the room and each go one after the other. Whereas here, they go on different days, and it really kind of slows down the pace of the story. I can see why they don't do it in other adaptations. So obviously the wizard meets the woman, tells them to go get the broomstick. This is something that really stuck out to me when I read it as a kid, that I really remembered. The wolf, bee, and crow scenes are horrific, and like no wonder they're rarely adapted. The 80s anime did them well, because basically in the book, the witch just keeps sending different things to them to try and kill them, and she sends 40 wolves. And while I think Dorothy's sleeping, the Tin Man just cuts the heads off all of them and kills them, and she wakes up and there's like a huge pile of dead wolves. And then she sends all these bees, and I think they try and sting the Tin Man, and then they all die. There's all these crows, and do they like snap their necks or something? But they kill all these crows. They just keep killing these animals, and it's horrific. Whereas again, in the 80s anime, which I'll need to jump into at some point, I think, they stop them when the Tin Man does cut the wolves, but then it turns out they were all magic and they were never alive anyway. So when he kills them, they just kind of like puff into magic, and there was no death there. But this, I was just like, the Tin Man kills a lot of animals. Just kills a lot of stuff. It also surprises me whenever I read this book how little the Wicked Witch of the West is in it. Like, she's much more of like, I mean, I guess she is the main villain of the book still, but there are so many other hurdles that she's only really in the middle of the book. It always surprises me. And she makes Dorothy and the Lion her slaves, and that really random thing to get caught on. But Dorothy taking a bath every night, I just thought was funny. Like, she's her slave, or the Wicked Witch's slave, but yeah, you can have a bath every night. But water will kill me. Don't bring that stuff anywhere near me. But you can have a bath, it's fine. Again, there's loads of characters as well as plot points that I forgot existed. There's Gaylet, who cursed the flying monkeys, and you learn the whole backstory about like his granddad, who was really mischievous and messed with her on a wedding day, and that's how they got trapped by the cap. And again, like I said, practical magic. These aren't just like random flying monkeys that do the witch's bidding because they want to. Like, they have a cap, and whoever wears the cap has to say these magic words, and then you get 3 wishes, and then that goes on to someone else. And I just think that's really interesting. And it's funny, even reading this book, which was the first ever Oz media, Wicked and Dorothy Must Die and things like that, Oz the Great Powerful, they will take the book and pull inspiration from it and tell their own stories. And in Wicked, obviously, that is the most point-blank way of saying, the wizard's a dictator. But in this, I still think beyond the Wicked Witch that the wizard is the real villain. The Wicked Witch feels more like a hurdle that they have to cross. But he instigates the death of all these women because he knows they're more powerful than him. He's just like, yeah, I needed you to kill her because she'd take away my throne of the Emerald City because she'd realise she's more powerful than me. And I'm like, you're stopping powerful women. Actually, I don't think you're a very good man. And I like that they don't really pretend he is. Whereas I feel like in the Wizard of Oz movie, I'm a humbug, I'm a very bad wizard, but I'm a good man. And in this, it's just more like he's just a bit of an arsehole, to be honest. So like I said in the description, the wizard gives his version of brains, a heart, and courage. He gives the scarecrow straw and needles, he has sharp thoughts, and he has a little sewn cushiony heart that he puts in the lapel of the Tin Man. For the lion, I think he just gives him a drink. I think he gives him a bev, he gets him drunk. He just gives him basically liquid courage. And he gives the lion liquor, which it's interesting. It's such a direct inspiration for Wicked. He gives him in the book a small green bottle with a liquid called courage, and obviously liquid courage means liquor. And I just thought it was interesting. It's never like expressly said it's alcohol, but it certainly is insinuated like that. Also, I mean, it's obvious, but it still surprised me how many lines from it are just directly pulled into the movie. So, for example, the wizard's excuse is that he's going to go visit his brother wizard, and that's what he says when he leaves in the movie. And in this book, because you do get a bit more time, certainly after the wizard is shown to be a sham, Dorothy kind of carries a bit more of a grudge to him. Like in the movie, she's very like, oh, you're a clever enough man to do it. And she seems to really like him. Whereas in the book, she works with him and she'll sew the balloon and all that. But she holds more of a grudge to him, which I like. I just think the wizard's an awful person. And I hate him. So after the wizard flies away in the balloon, they then go on a second treacherous journey to get to the South Sea Glinda. The fighting trees are in this bit. They're not earlier in the book, like in the movie. They're in this bit. The scene's quite short, and I always forget it does happen after the wizard leaves. Again, the Tin Man's just very violent. He's just like hacking away at them. And it's funny because I guess he's looking for a heart and he is heartless, but my God. Oh, and then we get to the China country. I do love this. It's an Oz concept that I really do adore, and I really feel for the little people that live there. Like Dorothy, Dorothy's a bit. I mean, she's a kid. You've got to forgive her. Basically, she meets the China princess. And she's like, "You're gorgeous. I'd love to take you home. Please, can I take you home? Like, put you on my shelf, and I'll look at you all the time." And the princess is like, "I'm a living royalty. You farm girl." Can you stop killing my horses and my cows by like stomping around everywhere? And yeah, I just think this is such a gorgeously descriptive area and somewhere that I'd love to see properly done in film. I think it's really fun as well that they say if they ever get taken out of China country, they become static. So if Dorothy had brought home, she'd just become a piece of China. And it kind of, begs that question for kids. It's kind of a Stephen Moffat thing now. They're like, oh my God, like is every China alive until they come out of China country? If you take any China that you might have in your grandma's house to Oz, will it come to life? So then before they get to Glinda, they meet the big stone head creatures who live on the side of a cliff, and they like kind of their heads out and like hammerhead them. And I wish that these were in more wider Oz media. I think that, there's clearly inspiration there in Wicked, both the musical and on stage, for characters in Ozomania. And then they get reference here and there. But I just think they're really visually interesting. And again, when I think about like an animated series, stop motion, or a video game, I just think these would be really, really well done. I think they're really interesting characters. So when we meet Glinda, her land of the south is all red. The colour for that land is red. And she has apparently this really thick red hair. And I think that that's so interesting. She's never described as a blonde. And even in the movie, Billy Burke had kind of like strawberry blonde hair, but it was very much was red. And it sort of begs the question, why has Glinda now so synonymously become a blonde, like a quote unquote ditzy blonde? I don't know why that changed. I just think that's interesting. Anyone who's listening, please let me know. But it felt very Glinda and very good, the good witch of the south, for her to use the magic cap to command the monkeys 3 times to help send the 3 friends home and then free the monkeys. I thought that was really sweet. Later in the books, there's more stuff about Glinda that I don't love. Like in the second book, they touched on her having, slaves that carry her around everywhere. And I thought that was, and it was a choice. But, in this, I can see why she's Glinda the Good, at least in this book. One thing I thought was interesting is that by the end of the book, when Dorothy's about to be sent to Kansas, each, the Scarecrow, the Lion, and the Tin Man, get an area to rule. The Lion goes to rule the kingdom of the beasts and the animals. Tin Man goes to rule the Winkies and the Wicked Witch's old castle. The Scarecrow is going to rule the Emerald City. I wonder why, because that changes in later books. They don't all want to rule, but I wondered if that's just maybe like a commentary of the time, something to do with the era, why the pinnacle of success for these 3 men is that they all end up ruling a different land. I also thought there was an interesting bit with the shoes. Obviously in the movie it's just click your heels 3 times and say there's no place like home, but in the book you click the heels and then you have to take 3 steps. You just click 3 times and take 3 steps, and then by the 3rd step you've almost like walked through a portal and you're where you want to go. And I thought that was interesting because they're shoes, like the shoes take you there. That's the point of them. Speaking of taking you there, it's interesting, I always forget that in the books, Oz is very much a real place that you can travel in and out of. It's not a dream country like in the movie. They try and make it seem very much like it could be in Dorothy's head. We don't know if it was real or not, but in this it's like, no, this is a physical place that you really go to and from. And, Dorothy lost her shoes on the journey. And I thought that was interesting. And a final note I had, I guess it's more for the movie than the book, but it's a good adaptation, I thought, that the filmmakers made the choice to change the center of the story to "There's no place like home." They near enough say "There's no place like home." I don't think with that exact wording in the book, but when she's clicking her heels, she goes, "Take me home to A&M," rather than "There's no place like home." And I just think "Take me home to A&M" doesn't quite have the same ring to it. And then obviously cap off the movie with, "Oh, where I am, there's no place like home." And much as coming home is very much the theme of the book, and it definitely like closes out the story, just that specific wording, I think, from the film was a great way to take this source material and adapt it. And those are this Munchkin's musings on The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I'm so glad I properly took the time to go into this book before going anywhere else, because I know that clearly every other adaptation of The Wizard of Oz roots to this book, and I want to try, as I'm doing this series, to read all the books. I don't see this series as like a chronological go-through. I don't want to go through every single book or every single item in order. And I'd be really interested to see what you want me to go into. I think, coming off the back of this, it sounds like I've got to dive into the 1980-something anime movie musical about this, because clearly I have some unearthed memories I need to dig into. But as I also touched on, something that really did interest me, which actually is the next piece of Oz media, is the 1902 musical. He was developing, L. Frank Baum, this musical in 1901. It was released in 1902. And there's so much interesting stuff about this. So please let me know. I think the two things I'm debating going into are the 1902 musical or the 1980s anime. Let me know. I don't think I'm going to do the movie anytime soon. Maybe like around an anniversary or something. Like, to be honest, I actually think I'm going to break the movie up rather than do like one episode on the movie. I think I'm probably more likely going to do an episode on deleted scenes and sections. I've got this amazing book, which I found in a charity shop in Folkestone, which is the original scripts of The Wizard of Oz, which have all the scenes that were cut, you know, the bees and the Rainbow Road and all this stuff. I think there's a really interesting episode there about deleted stuff or script edits. I want to do an episode on weird Oz adaptations you've never heard of. I want to do an episode on the original version of The Wizard of Oz before they shut down production, you know, the blonde-haired Dorothy, or, you know, the developed, beautiful Wicked Witch. And so I don't see myself doing one solo episode on that. But yeah, please let me know what you would like to hear from me. And you can do that on all of my social media. We are on Instagram and TikTok currently, which are at munchkin.musings on both. Or you can email me, munchkinmusingspod@gmail.com. And let me know, what would you like to see in the podcast? This is a very new format to me. I'm taking inspiration from previous podcasts that I've done. But if anything in the format isn't working, or you want me to try anything else or find out some more information, please let me know. But in the meantime, thank you so much for listening to the musings of this Munchkin, and I'm looking forward to seeing you on the next episode. Bye!